So I want to ask Maximilian Klein about the specific abuses that we have seen in Germany. As you know, Human Rights Watch has reported on especially sexual abuse in not just Japan, but also Haiti, Afghanistan. We have worked with the athletes in the United States who have experienced abuse, especially gymnasts. And we all know that the German Olympic Sports Federation, the DOSB, has apologized to victims of sexual abuse in Germany. And of course, the German gymnasts have been very vocal after the documentary Athlete A. So do you see this as a moment of reckoning for past abuses in the name of Olympic medals and trophies? And what is your analysis of the landscape for athlete voice in both G7 countries like Germany and Japan, and also worldwide?
Thanks a lot. I'll again split my answers as good as I can, starting with Germany. I think for Germany, many developments come together, creating a perfect window of opportunity, a sad window of opportunity, but it's still strategically good. First, we have an independent commission looking into cases of sexual abuse in sport. That is a commission set up by the government, but it's independent. So they are looking into this. Then we have all these cases of abuse all over the world, especially in gymnastics, coming from the US, Canada, the UK. The cases in Japan and judo were known to the German landscape as well. And thirdly, in the past months, there have been revelations of abuse in gymnastics in Germany, in swimming, and in boxing. And lastly, and this is something I want to highlight, and I'm of course I'm also proud of this, but there's an independent athletes association trying to drive structural change, because we've seen that sport institutions and sport organizations have something like an institutional inertia, and they are sometimes reluctant to undergo structural change and to be leaders of change when it comes to protecting the athletes. Just saying that you feel sorry and that you want to provide a safe environment is not enough. You must be able to undergo a cultural change process and a structural one. And therefore, I think now, and this is what we've done, we've published a paper calling for an independent structures, for an independent center for safe sport. And this is, all these factors coming together are creating a moment of change in Germany, where it's not only about sport, it's about bringing in the government on the federal level and on the state level, bringing in the media, bringing in society, bringing in all stakeholders and having a critical spotlight on what's going on in sport and which kind of sport we actually want to have. So that's the analysis for Germany. And I'm passing it over to the translator first. To add, so that if we take this analysis from Germany, I want to say, I mean, because Minky asked for the moment of justice, what we see is, in my opinion, many countries, also from the northern hemisphere, and this is what the question regarding G7 was referencing to. They are like economic powerful countries, but they're facing the same challenges when it comes to abuse and violence in sport. And my observation is that some of these countries are now in the lead. For example, in the United States, they established a Center for Safe Sport. In Canada, the debate is quite advanced, and Japan actually is debating a safe sports center as well. But in many instances, the debate is led very reactive. So there must be a scandal that sport and society are reacting. All too often, they are not proactively leading the way. And you need actors and drivers of change. And my observation is that you need a scandal, you need to involve politics, or politics must be interested in it, and they are stepping in when it's already too late. And then everyone is discussing setting up independent structures and sort of limiting the autonomy of sport. Because let's face it, the autonomy of sport as it is also responsible why you have these closed shops, you have these closed systems that make violence and abuse actually a little bit more likely. So this is something we see, that there is now a window of opportunity all around the world, because so many countries are facing the same challenges. But on the other hand, we see that you need drivers of change, which oftentimes are not sport organizations. Oftentimes they are athletes organizations, survivors organizations, human rights organizations, and you need to be clever in building up your alliances and getting in other actors like the governments to actually set up independent structures and to give more oversight when it comes to sport. The other thing I want to stress is also for the international dimension, each and every country is facing the same challenges, and we need more of this exchange of information, because we took the information from Japan and told our government and our politicians what's happening in Japan, for example. And you need to have this conflict transferred from survivors and from victims that are on their own to institutions like athletes organizations, so that this fight, this political power fight, is actually led by an organized institution. Take it away from the shoulders of individual survivors and victims, and transfer it to institutions that can last longer and can be stronger in the fight for change.
I wanted to say that I will ask one last question, which has been submitted by our colleagues at Unisaca. And then I will go to Sugiyama Sensei, who is the leader of the Japan Safe Sport Project, and then open the floor to questions. The question from Unisocc is that in Japan, every few years, there are suicides by high school athletes due to harassment by coaches. And it is these series of suicides, in fact, that made Human Rights Watch want to research the problem of taibatsu, or corporal punishment in sport. The question for Maximilian Klein is, are there such suicides in Europe as well? If so, is it considered a problem? And in Japan, the kind of abuses that from coaches has in some ways shifted from the taibatsu, physical beating, to mental harassment and psychological harassment, or verbal abuse, neglect, and excessive interference. And do you see such a shift also happening in Germany or other developed countries?
That's a tough question, and I was following these developments in Japan, and we had an internal discussion about that, because we were quite shocked. This is something at this extent, to best of our knowledge, we don't know of in Germany, and also across Europe. As far as we know, that over the last 20 or 25 years, there were like 70 or 80 suicides contemplated or completed. But this is something we don't know of as a structural problem. But what we know, and there are studies in Germany and in Europe on violence and abuse experiences in sport, in mass sport and in elite sport. And the number of sexual abuse or sexual violence, that's a problem, especially for our female members. And this is something that corresponds to your observation, Minky. Physical and especially psychological violence, emotional violence, this seems to be a far higher number than we think of and than we thought. There is research, needs to be more research done about the actual definitions and the actual extent. But we see, especially in elite sport, that these dependencies between coach and athletes and certain structures and power dynamics in sport organizations are actually quite sometimes favorable for these kind of violence experiences. And so this our solution is twofold, actually, and this is something we're trying to push in Germany. Having a structural debate. What are the structures that favor this kind of first I'll hand over to the translator and then give my second answer. Sorry. Thank you. And there's a second part to the answer. I think, and it might be true for Japan as well. We have a twofold debate. The one is a cultural thing. So we have to undergo a cultural change on the ground, reaching each and every training camp and reaching each and every coach and training ground and staff. And the other one is a structural debate. We are of the opinion, as for the latter, that we need to have different structures in place. There needs to be something like a separation of powers. So there needs to be an independent body that actually regulates, or that has something like an oversight structure and that athletes or victims can go to. Because on the other hand, what we have to say is sport is doing a good job in prevention work. But what happens if prevention fails, right? So I'm not here to say sport is failing. I'm just saying there are like structural elements that needs to be overcome and that needs to be adjusted. On the other hand, to bring change in the minds and in the culture of sport, it's important. It doesn't go without sport. It doesn't go without the sport organizations and not without the coaches. So here it's really about that not only us, but also the sport organizations are committed to change from the very top, but then actually implement this change process to the very bottom. And in Germany, for example, one sort of stick in the carrot and sticks approach is that our government and also the top sporting organizations only pass on money if the sport organizations below have safe concepts and safeguarding concepts in place. But here again, the question is who is actually controlling its implementation, right? So just saying there are like two components. There's a structural component, a cultural component, and I think athletes and their representatives and survivors can be a driving force in actually implementing this speak up culture and actually opening these closed systems to a wider public.
Hi, Maxi. I'm Shoichi Sugiyama, lawyer admitted in Japan. I am working with Human Rights Watch for strengthen safe sports in Japan. Thank you for your informative lecture today. I believe today's participant interest is totally satisfied with your lecture. On behalf of the participant, I'd like to ask you one question. How to invite athletes into the movement? How to change the mind of athlete? I'd like to comment the background of this question. As you explained, to strengthen safe sport movement, we need three associations. One is the human rights entity. The second is association for the victim. And third is the association for the athlete. In my understanding, in Japan, there exists a human rights entity like Human Rights Watch or the Association for Victims like or Japan Judo Accident Victims Association. But in Japan, we have a few associations for the athlete. Although in Japan, we have the athlete union, like JPBPA Baseball Association or Football Association. But most of individual athlete sports has no such kind of association for safe sports. So in Japan's cultural background, athletes tend to hesitate, raise their voice. Athletes hesitate, claim before the court, arbitration, or internal remedies. My question is, I was surprised at the fact that 1,200 athletes are a member of Athleten Deutschland. So my question is, how to invite athletes into this movement, how to change their mind, or how to create the environment favorable for athletes to endure the right to remedy.
Thank you. Thanks so much also for giving some insights into the situation in Japan. So as far as I understood, in Japan, you have some form of association, sometimes for the victims or survivors, and you also have like a unionized structures for like team-based athletes. And I think it's the same situation as in Germany, even better. Because in Germany, we don't have really like survivors associations. I think if there is a recipe or like a standard approach to all these questions you pose, I can tell you from Germany, there was a right time. There was a right window of opportunity where athletes became overly critical of sport organizations because of the Russian doping scandal. They were fed up, it was enough. And there was a critical media landscape, media that is critical and helps to sort of shed light on the problems in sport, and a critical government. So this was a perfect constellation for actually for us to take off. But as you said, like athletes are hesitant. They are sometimes cautious to actually speak up because they fear repression. And to kick it off, we needed, or in Germany, we had some individual athletes who were successful and who were political minds, political entrepreneurs that were fearless to speak up and to be the front runners. And then, shall I interrupt for translation or? Yeah. So I ended with, you need sort of brave individual front runners as athletes who take the lead. But we were supported by experts. There was a supporting field of 30 people, lawyers like you are, human rights experts, so many people that supported us. And then we convinced media and politics to give funding, because you need to take this conflict off the individual shoulders of athletes and put it in an organization, depersonalize conflict. And we founded the organization, we got the money, and that was like a startup phase that was super turbulent and exciting. And then we hired staff. And once you professionalize, once you have a CEO, you have a policy officer, you have a legal expert, and he has organizing people it's their job to talk to the athletes and get them into membership. And this is how we did it in Germany. We offer services where athletes can directly take a benefit. For example, we offer free legal counseling. So it's not only the policy level where we are doing stuff, but we're also offering services for our members. They need legal experts, they need psychologists, whatever. So this is an instrument where you can organize your member base. And as your member base grows, as is with any union, your power grows. And since we are growing and growing, our power grows, and we are getting heard, we are getting taken seriously, and then we are now starting to change the system. So this is sort of the our approach, how we did it. And I'm not sure what can be transferred, but I think it would be great if other countries could organize themselves too. Once you organize the athletes, once they have their own independent association, they will be able to speak up and change.
I will propose to continue the conversation with Maximilian Klein. We would like to stay in touch with him and to learn the lessons from his important movement in Germany, and also to share experiences back and forth. I think the way that the report that Human Rights Watch and Unisocc and the Japan Judo Accidents Association and also Athletes Save Japan, the way our report has informed the actions of Athleten Deutschland in Germany is very important. And we would in turn like to be informed about the policy progress Athleten Deutschland is making. And so we welcome you to the Unisaca Safe Sport family, and we hope to speak to you again soon.